Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. This is the second in a series of 3 webinars titled Compete and Win with Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. My name is Heleen Snelting. I'm one of the presenters today, as well as your moderator. Before we start, I would like to share some housekeeping items and disclaimers. The information shared during the webinar is confidential to TIBCO, and we ask you not to use or duplicate without our prior written consent. Also, we would like to emphasize that the material provided is for informational purposes only. Today's webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be shared with all of those registered after the webinar. We're also going to have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions for us anytime during the webinar, you can use the Q&A panel at the right-hand side of the WebEx application to submit your questions, and we'll get to that, answering those at the end of the webinar. So let's get started. We have put together this 3-part webinar series to inform you of our complete TIBCO Analytics software portfolio following our recent acquisition of Statistica. And in this series, we show how these tools enable data scientists individually as well as organizations as a whole. And specifically, we explain how to build and apply machine learning and AI solutions. If you missed the first webinar, it's now available to you as a webinar on demand. And the second webinar is really hands-on and for data scientists. We'll show you how you can make your day-to-day work better, more collaborative, and faster, more repeatable, also more scalable in terms of being able to share results and recommended actions with your colleagues or as an input for an automated process. And as we discussed in last webinar, your skills are likely scarce in your organization. So hopefully you'll see today how, when you follow the methods that will show you, your impact and visibility of your work in the organization will increase. For webinar 3, we have invited a broader group again, data scientists, business users, as well as those responsible for analytics strategy in your companies and tools. And in this third webinar, we will cover customer stories demonstrating positive business outcomes resulting from using data science. And this should help to further understand and justify investments in analytics. But let me now introduce you to our presenters of today. So I'm Heleen. I'm the manager of the TIBCO Data Science team for EMEA, and with 20 years of experience in the food industry, market research, and CPG and retail. I also have a big passion for knowledge sharing, so really enjoy facilitating webinars like the one today. Costa Silva is a senior data scientist at TIBCO. She has a PhD in artificial intelligence and 18 years of data science experience. She's been with TIBCO for 4 years and really enjoys demystifying some of the complexity behind data science for those new to it. And Ritika Sehgal joined TIBCO recently as part of the Statistica acquisition and brings 7 years of advanced analytics experience. She's skilled in multiple techniques and has specific expertise in conducting pricing and segmentation analytics across verticals like CPG and retail, IT, healthcare, and banking. So in the next 55 minutes, I will first finish my introduction and then hand over to Anna and Ritika, who will be taking you through 2 detailed exercises. Anna will start with a prescriptive analytics demo applicable to various use cases, and Ritika will teach you step-by-step how to build the credit scoring workflow, which she introduced you to in webinar 1. We will then wrap up with some TIBCO community info and the live Q&A. So in webinar 1, there were 2 key things we covered, which we'll build upon today. First of all, we talked about presenting and sharing your analyses visually and in a user-friendly, interactive manner, which has a big impact on usage and adoption of analytics. We also talked about connected intelligence and how at TIBCO our main goal is to help you and the organizations you work in to find and then act upon the so-called critical business moments. For example, when you want to be alerted about a customer who's about to cancel a contract, and to know whether you should intervene because you actually understand and can predict the future value of this customer. And if indeed this is a customer you should try to keep, you will be able to have a targeted recommendation of what to do to prevent this specific or this cluster or profile of customer to actually cancel your contract or their contract. So ultimately, being able to respond to these type of critical business moments effectively will improve customer experience and business results, and this will put you at that desired competitive advantage versus your peers. We also explained the various steps that you as a data scientist need to go through to make this happen, and how to get from data to insights to action. So finally, before I hand over to Anna, I would like to mention that everything we show you today is available on the TIBCO community for you, exercises and data sets to download and to try this for yourself. If you have downloaded the exercises already, you should now be able to follow along. And with that, I would like to hand over to Anna, who will be showing a prescriptive analytics demo.
Thank you, Heleen. So I will be sharing my screen. Can you please give me presenter rights?
Yes.
Here we go. So the first demo is about prescriptive analytics. And here we are going to be showing a setup of a solution that can be applied to different use cases. Basically, it's a modeler platform that allows you to create machine learning models to single out specific groups of people or transactions or rows, basically, of your data that you want to separate from the rest. And it can be any number of use cases for that matter. The machine learning will also allow you to spot out behavior in your data. So the maths is maths, and therefore it can be, and therefore you can, and that's why you can reuse the maths. Anyway, some of the use cases in which we have applied this template has been, of course, fighting financial crime, customer churn, predictive maintenance, maverick lot detection, credit risk, customer support, claim management, and offer design. Maverick lots, for example, are when you have manufacturing lots and you have some that may be faulty, and you apply tests to those, and you can analyze those tests and single out the bad lots. So having said this, let's go into demo mode. But before that, of course, I need to show you the architecture of the solution. So basically, machine learning is about exploiting your historic data and using it in real time or to improve your decisions. So in this setup, we will show you how we can use Spotfire and TEAR to connect to your historic data sources and allow visualizing and analyzing it. And then you use TEAR for making the machine learning. And then once you have your model, you push the machine learning models to Streambase, which is our transaction real-time manager. Streambase sees the models and it acts in real time. So it applies, receives transactional data, can enrich that data by looking again up in the information in the historic repository, creates the data that the models requires, applies the model, compares the probability of the incidents with a threshold, and, for example, will detect the possible fraud cases, and for those will initiate an investigation. This investigation will be presented to your users again via BPM, Business Process Management, and the users will be able to again consult Spotfire and historic information via web player in order to investigate transactions. Streambase will also send all information to real-time live data mart and data view, which allows users to have a real-time dashboard of all the action that is happening in the event handling. So we will be showing every of these steps in this setup, so really quite a production environment for machine learning deployment in real time. I'll also show how easy it is to use. So the first input here is the financial, is Spotfire. Spotfire is a data visualization tool that can embed any form of advanced mathematics and statistical engine to allow doing some really, really rich data products and guided analytics apps. It is also very good for ad hoc data discovery. I will first very briefly show you this template, which has been created as a guided safe environment for our users to run and apply machine learning. Notice when you first created, it was created by a data scientist. Actually, it was created by me, but it can now be used by anyone in the business to question the models, to understand the data given the models, and to have better insights into their own operations, as well as to manage the day-to-day of a model's life without the data scientist necessarily needed to be involved every time you want to do a refresh of the model. Anyway, the template has got 4 parts. The first will allow you to just visualize your data and understand it and increase your general culture about it. The second one applies supervised learning. The third one applies unsupervised learning. And eventually you can deploy both models either in batch, in Spotfire itself, or in real time. And the template is based on a white paper that is embedded in it. So in part 1, visualize and understand your data. We have an input here where you can replace your data. Then some initial exploration with univariate analysis. Here you can look at the behavior of a particular metric. Here you can look at bivariate analysis. And for example, notice that when there is payment done in store credit, there tends to be more fraud historically than in the other types of payment, which suggests problems with your internal controls. Here you can see a box plot, for example, showing the position of the 2 distributions of fraud and non-fraud, and the fact that these 2 circles are not superimposed means that there is statistical significance in considering that the 2 distributions have different location. Then you have the part for supervised learning, where here you put the variable you want to predict, the flag and the predictors. You press a button, run the random forest model. It gives you the variable importance, and this is the answer to the first question that you had in your exercise in the community, which was what are the drivers of fraud? So for your data, it's the number of transactions happening from the same device card account over the last 24 hours, and things like, for example, the similar values for the last 1 or even 5 hours are irrelevant for your data at this moment at understanding fraud. Then you have a model assessment that has a ROC curve and a maximum F1 that you can reach. These are all visualizations that come from this script as well. And then you can look at applying the results of applying this model to a test set, again done within the script. And here you can add the threshold for when you want to intervene. In part 2, there's the unsupervised learning, where you're basically here applying PCA, principal component analysis, to distinguish, to represent each component, each transaction in the component space. Most transactions are going to be close to 0, 0, in fact 60,000 out of 62, but a few are going to be far, and the distance between a transaction and the normal transactions in the center, it gives you an idea of its oddity. In the next page, here we can see we can set a threshold for that oddity and write it here. Then the application to real time is going to give you a list of the transactions you want to look at today if you apply the model in batch, the model that you've just seen the quality of. And here you can press a button to send a model to Streambase. So now that I've done all this, I can show you and give you an overview of this analytics app. We can go deeper into it, but the first thing that I want to, that you're probably wondering is, you said that I said I could reuse it on different use cases, so is it really true? And if so, how did I actually create this template? So we're going to be answering these questions now. Here you can see below that I had a similar template. It's the same template applied to the problem of Maverick lots. But what I'm going to do now is open a template from scratch and replace the data with a different use case data. So if I go here, I can have add data table or replace. If I have replace, I can choose a number of different data sources like Amazon, Google Analytics, Cloudera Impala, HP, IBM, Netezza, SAP, HANA, Teradata, etc. And I have a number of options. I can either import the data, which I have to do if my data is Excel or text, but I don't have to do if it's a database. Or I can leave the data external, which is, of course, what I'm going to prefer for data sources like Hadoop, or I can load subsets of data on demand. So now I'm going to choose Select File and replace my data table with this other data set here. First thing Spotfire does is give you the values of the data, sorry, the data types. So if I press OK, here I just have the option to import because it's a TXT. I have options here to do a number of transformations already, like normalizing the data, pivoting, and so on. If I press OK, the data actually gets loaded into Spotfire, and you can see, of course, now there's a difference in column names, so we just ignore that, just say OK, and Spotfire replaces the data. So now, if I go straight to initial exploration, things don't look so good. But if I press the drop-down menu, I can replace the values, and very quickly things look good again. So drop-down menu, notice that here is the variable I want to predict, which is customer status. The flag now is churn. I can choose any categorical variables. These drop-down menus have got the ability to separate between strings and numerical, and using a bit of search within the space. And then in part 2, I'm going to go to select my predictors, press refresh model. It runs for a little while. Behind this button, I have a tear script that gives me runs a number of steps. I will show it to you shortly. And this is the answer to the second question in that we gave in the exercises for this webinar, and that you can do at home yourself, which gives you that the drivers for churn in your data right now are the churn proportion of in-calls and extra call charges. So basically, churn proportion of in-calls indicates that people churn when a large proportion of the people who call them the most have already churned. And so churn in your data is a social phenomena spreading through your network, and that's more important to handle through that side than to actually change the pricing structure, although the pricing structure is also important according to the extra charge calls. Thank you. Here you have a model assessment. There's your ROC curve. The maximum threshold the maximum F1 you can reach is with a threshold of 0.5. And then the results applied to a test data set. You can select a threshold, see the expected true positive rate, 62% in this case. Well, and then type that threshold here. You'll see why later. In part 3, you can actually then apply the unsupervised learning to the customer data, and you can see that all your customers are more or less organized in a cluster, with some customers far away. You could apply clustering on this data now, and but you can see it's mostly one cluster, so maybe there's no need to do that. And now I can look at my most unusual customers. If I just run that script that's behind this button and set a threshold for choosing to interact with those customers, then again, I have the result of applying the model to both models in batch. So I can actually, by sorting the data from probability of churn, I can sort my customers by whom I want to interact with first. And if I multiply this probability with the customer lifetime value metric, then I can really make sure I keep those customers that I'm more interested in. Alternatively, I can press a button and send a model to Streambase. So that is how the reusability is done with this template. But now you may be well interested in knowing how on earth I did this. So first thing to say is that if, in this case, I replaced the existing data, but if I had added a new data source, I could have, Spotfire would open straight into the recommended visualization, where I can press a few buttons and Spotfire will generate the visualizations that describe this. So I can just press add this for the one that I think best represents my business view, and the visual is now there. I can increase its size and so on. So actually creating visualizations is very simple. If I also want to add a calculated column, I can go, there's 256 different ways, Excel-like ways in which I can create columns, including the ability to call TER, which stands for Typical Enterprise Runtime for R, in order to create a new column. TER is a statistical engine that's embedded in Spotfire, no need for extra installation. So now I can actually write here a little calculation. If handset equals A, then once L0, I will call this dummy. I will press OK, and now I can see that in my list of predictors, there's my dummy. So lots of ability there. Notice that if my data is in database, when I press Insert Calculated Columns, here I don't have the Spotfire calculations. I have the calculations that the database allows. So from a very similar look and feel interface, I can have a lot of ability to interact with my data. Apart from this, like I said, TER is integrated in Spotfire, so I can go to Tools, TER Tools, and launch a TER console or launch RStudio in order to have an environment in which I can write my scripts and share them. So for example, I'm going to create here a very new simple script, which is output equals input. I'm going to select it and put it into Spotfire. So if I go to register data function, I can put this script. I could, of course, have written it here directly. I'm going to call this dummy script. My script is in TER, but it could have been SAS or MATLAB. It could also have been a KNIME workflow or a R, of course, open source R. When I now press, so notice that there's an output and an input, so I have to declare these outputs and inputs. So I'm going to just put input, table, all, okay. And in the outputs, I'm going to write output, table, okay. Okay, and that's it. Now I can save this script to the library. And the library is a shared repository that all my colleagues can access. So now under data functions, I already had two that I had put there. Now I'm going to add my little dummy script. So these are then data functions that are scripts that are going to be available for my colleagues to use and reuse, or for myself in the future. So now when I actually want to run this, I just have to press run. I want to this to be a table with my input data and all columns. Here I can also make it respond to filters and markings, and my output is going to be this. Notice that I could have had tables or columns or row or just values as inputs and outputs, and many of them at the same time. So now I just ran this. So now if I go to data table properties, I can see I have a new data table here that is a data table called output, and I can actually see that it comes from a script, a very simple script. So full data traceability as well. There's also many options for handling missing values and doing treatment of data quality on the fly like that I'm not going to go over one by one. But now that I have explained how to create a script in TER, I'm going to show you the script that's behind the button. So brace yourself. So if I go to edit data function properties, I have all the data functions that are part of my template, including the random forest one. So if I press edit script, I have a few steps here. So first is that I have a for debugging section, which basically is the first thing that runs, and what it will do is, if this directory exists, cdemo, it will save a file with all the inputs that have been passed from Spotfire, which in this case are response, explanatory variables, and goal indicator. It will save all of those into this R data file that I can then, from RStudio, run. So in fact, if I want to run this in RStudio, what it will do is load the inputs into TER, and now I can run the script from here and use it for debugging and as I'm building my data, my my script. There's many things we do here. First, we check that there's an IP connection. We have a function that does data cleansing, which will allow you to, for example, drop factors that have more than 32 values and then do treatment of missing values by different options and approaches, treat missing values and how fully documented. And then I will have a function for actually applying the random forest, which will include separating 80% of my data for training and then the rest for testing. I create a formula from my response variables and my explanatory variables. That will be the model formula. Then I actually apply the random forest. I save the model as a blob, which allows me to save it as a string, as a binary object, sorry, inside of Spotfire. I will create a variable importance chart. I will also apply the model to a test set, generate the ROC curves, change the threshold, the default threshold that TER uses for it to be one that maximizes F1, calculate that confusion matrix, and apply then the predictions, send the predictions to the original data. This one function here describes the default behavior if there's an error in the script for any reason. So we will generate dummy outputs if that's the case. Finally, down here is the section where we actually call the function. So here I am applying the cleansing data, and I do that with try, which allows me to do very beautiful error handling abilities. And give me feedback in what's happening. I will also have a try for actually calling the random forest. So there are a number of inputs, as we said, the response, the goals, and a number of outputs, including the variable importance and the ROC curve. So we have seen the inputs, notice, are from this drop-down menu. And the inputs will be, here is where I set the response, and the predictors. Notice that these are inside the text area, and they are document properties, if we go to edit control, that are filled in automatically from the column names of fraud input. And here I could have had many options, including expressions or unique values in a column in a data, or actually fixed values that I can type in myself, or a numerical range. So there's a lot of flexibility there too. Because TER can call a command line, TER can also be, you can also from any Spotfire call a local TER, or a TER that's in a server, or for example a TER that's in Hadoop, which allows it to, for example, call MapReduce jobs or save or Spark TER jobs. So from a similar look and feel in Spotfire, you can have very nice things happening in the background. So now we are going to actually jump ahead, come back to fraud, jump ahead and show you what happens when I press my buttons and I send the model to Streambase. I should show you that when I actually send the model, I have here in the function for sending the model, in my script I have two parts, and this is the last bit of script you'll be seeing. So there's, of course, the debugging that allows you to actually debug a scoring function. So this means that the scoring function that will happen in real time is defined from Spotfire and is in the hands and access of the data scientist or your TER expert, and will involve two parts. This part here runs only once when a new model is loaded. This is what happens in Streambase. This part is model that happens in Streambase. So this part runs only once when the model is loaded, and then you have this part will be running Streambase every time you score a line. So this scoring will have treatment of missing values, and then factorizations, and then it will have the actual scoring function that is going to treat missing values, factorize, and apply the actual model, and then compare, and then what it has to do. So everything is transparent from the data science and the Spotfire interface. So now very briefly, we go into a setup of the real-time environment. This is Streambase, where it's a drag and drop tool. So here I can have several icons that I can connect together. The end user or the data scientist doesn't need to see this, but this is set up by the stream-based expert and the real-time data people. But I can also have icons for R, for TER, for PMML, POJOs, H2O, etc. If I go into this, which is a combination of other workflows, I can see my transaction manager where I'm going to apply a TER predict, and then I'm going to show everything in real time. And for those that are alerts, I'm going to open a BPM, business process management, and send an email to the investigator for him to have an environment to know what to analyze. In the TER predict, I have two parts. I have the load model part, which runs a script that's called prepare R that I'm not going to show, but I have the scoring part in TER, which just runs score out equals score input. So it's just one line where the meaning of score was created by the data scientist on the other side. So now I'm going to go into debug mode just to resume my data scene, my data feed. And I can see now the live view dashboard where I see the real-time action of my transactions coming in and being scored by the unsupervised model and the supervised one, and also that those that are above the threshold, where the threshold is in orange. I'm going to very briefly pause this and show you that when I actually scored the model, one of the things loaded the model, one of the things I do is do some model control. So I keep a little table of what each of the models that was created and their authors and when the models were deployed. So lots of options for security here. As I'm running the models and deployment in real time, I start in my email receiving fraud alerts that tell me that this specific transaction has a probability of fraud like this from the supervised model, this from the unsupervised, and has two links, one for the case management dashboard, which allows my investigator to log in and have the environment where his investigations are going to be auditable. And so there's my environment. He can actually go to the cases he needs to investigate today and go into those cases and perform his investigations in an auditable manner. And I have, as I said in the beginning, the Spotfire investigative template that for a specific alert gives me all the information around it in terms of, for example, the people that this person had transactions with. I have once created a spider plot like this. Here is just one level of depth, but I have once created it for up to 6 levels of distance from the original set of alarms based on big data myself. So very briefly for a wrap-up, we have seen how we were using Spotfire and TER to make models on top of your historic data. This making models can be adapted and have a similar look and feel in terms of template, whether it's big or small data. Then we have the models being deployed to Streambase and treated with the script that was created and by the data scientist from his interface. And then each transaction in real time is scored against the model, and those that are above threshold of for the supervised or unsupervised are then treated in a special manner, which involves sending emails if you want, or doing any type of action directly to the customer. Finally, you have the real-time dashboard where you see the entire what's happening to the entire flow. So that was the Spotfire, TER, and Streambase demo. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'm going to pass on to Ritika, who will show you the statistical part. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Can I get the presenter rights?
Anna, could you pass on the presenter rights to Ritika?
Oh, okay. How do I do that?
I think you'd pass it on to me, so I'll change it to Ritika.
Yeah. There we go. There we go. Let me share my screen. Hello everyone. Before we start the demo, I would like to mention that we have uploaded step-by-step instructions on the TIBCO community to replicate this demo. You can download the PDF file from the community and try the demo at your end. Let's go through the demo now. There you go. I would like to take you through the data once again to understand the objective of this demo. Each row represents one customer of a bank, and we have various information regarding the customers like balance of current account, purpose of credit, and so on. Our aim is to predict credit ratings for new observations with information available on these other variables. Let's open the workspace we saw in our previous demo and see step by step on how we can recreate this workspace today. So this workspace shows multiple models being compared, like random forest, boosted trees, and then the PMMLs are being deployed through the rapid deployment node. Today, we will create data connections, do data checks, create these models, deploy these models, and finally visualize the results in Spotfire. So first step towards recreating is to open a blank workspace. I go to Home, New, Workspace, a blank workspace, click OK. There are two ways I can import my data to the workspace. One is directly importing the files, which we have already uploaded on the TIBCO community, or create a connection through enterprise data. Let's see how we directly connect our files, and then we'll go through the enterprise data system. You click on Files, go to the folder where you have saved your data sets, and there you go. I can click on the historical data, open, and you can see the data is now embedded in my workspace. Now, let's do another step, which is by getting the data into the workspace through enterprise connection. The question arises, what is an enterprise system? Let's go to the enterprise manager here. So Statistica Enterprise System offers a wide selection of tools for collaboration work, a web browser-based user interface to access Statistica capability and reports, and also a highly optimized interface to access enterprise-wide data repositories, including options to rapidly deploy, process large data sets from remote servers in place without creating local copies. So let's start the process now. The first step is to create the folder structure. You can go to System View, create new folder, mention demo, enter, and you can commit or save this folder. Now within this folder, you can create various folder structures like data, again commit to it, or workflows, where you will be saving your workflows or reports or PMML models, and so on and so forth. Right. Once the enterprise structure has been set, the next step is to create database connections. So how do we create a database connection? Let me you can right-click on your database connection, create a new OLEDB database connection. We already have Statistica spreadsheets to which we need to connect. You can also use SQL Server as seen here, or you can use ODBC drivers, or you can use OLEDB provider for analysis services. We are currently using Statistica spreadsheets. Click Next. Select the respective folder where you have saved these files. There we go. Click OK. Test your connection. And done. So you have a new database connection. You can name it as webinar, commit, And you can give permissions to the people who will have access to this data. So I'm giving permissions to administrators here. There you go. Now, once the database connection has been set, we need to get the data into the enterprise folder which we created. So you right-click on the data folder, new data configuration, create the connection to the database connection you just created, go to queries. Now there are two ways. You can write the SQL statement on your own. I'm not good in writing SQL statements, so I'll go to SQL Wizard and download the file directly, upload the file to Statistica directly from there. I can drag the file into this blank screen and select all the fields or select the fields which I want to pull to Statistica and return this data to Statistica. There you go. You can see now the data has been pulled into Statistica. You have the name, type, target name, the target format, and various other details. You can now again save, which is like commit, and give permissions again to the people whom you want to access, whom you want to give access to. Once this is done, we need to go back to our workspace and try to create a link to this data. So you can go to New Data Source, go to Enterprise Data, and as you can see, I already have various data sets that I have created a link to. You can refresh and see the one which we just created, and it goes in the demo. And here is the data which we recently uploaded. So let's click on the data, and we have the historical data in our blank workspace. Once you run, you can see the same data has been uploaded or linked to this workspace. Now you can start creating models or doing data health checks by linking the nodes to this specific data. Okay, so what is the next step? Next step, once you get the data into the workspace, is to understand the data structure, for which Statistica has provided a node called Data Health Check node. So you can go to the data menu, click on the Data Health Check node. You can see that it has directly connected to the data. But if you have multiple data, the links on this workspace, you can simply move this and click it to other node. So let's go back to this node. Let me show you an already executed data health check summary node, because it takes a bit of time as it sees the entire data structure. So this node mainly provides summary of the variables, like the classifications. There you go. So you have the variable information, the type, the valid observations, you have information around the sparse data, you have information around the outlier detections, you have information around the invariance, as well as some redundancy checks. Okay. Once you have understood your data and how your data is structured, you can start building models on the data. We can start with a node called feature selection, as this is one of the preliminary stages in process of data mining, when the data set includes many variables that could actually not be used in the model building. So feature selection node will help us pick up the best or the most important variables required for modeling. Let's go to our workspace which we are working on. I search here feature selection, and I can get the feature selection node. You can directly connect your data again to this feature selection mode, go to edit parameters, provide the variables, your dependent variable, your categorical dependent variable, which in this case is credit rating, your continuous predictors which you are using, or your categorical predictors which you are using for the data. Click OK. Okay, and you can run the node directly from here. Let's see the results again. So you can see your results in feature selection. It has given you a list of important variables based on their chi-squares and the p-values. And now you can only use these variables in your model building. Let's start creating the models now. So let's go back to our blank workspace. How do we actually get the models in here? So let's start with random forest. Go on data mining menu. You have a couple of models here like random forest, boosted trees, classification and regression, and in neural networks you have sand regression. So let's go to random forest classification. You can link the random forest classification directly to the data, or you can link this to the feature selection node itself. So once you do, you can go on the edit parameters. If you are linking it to the feature selection node, you can use previous input descriptions because we already provided the inputs in the feature selection node. Or if you are directly connecting it to the data, you need to again define your dependent variable, either it's categorical continuous or continuous and categorical predictors. So in this case, we are just running the default random forest or boosted tree models. But if you want more advanced or improved models, you can go to the advanced settings, play around with the options mentioned here, and you can also provide some stopping conditions, play around with them to improvise your model. Right? There's something called a code generator, which we would be using because we are generating PMML codes, but you can also generate C++, Java, SAS, Teradata, and the other mentioned codes here. Now, let's see the same thing for boosted trees. We click on boosted tree classification. I can again link it to the data, edit parameters, and the same things that you just saw in random forest. Okay? So we are not doing any changes here. We are just running the default options. Let's see the results in the default options. So you have results of random forest. There you go. So you can see the summary, the importance plots, the lift charts, and the PMML model that has been deployed. So this PMML model is also an output of the analysis we just did. Okay. Now, after executing these models, we can validate these models on the validation data set. We have something called a rapid deployment node, which helps us deploy all these PMML models to our validation data and compute very quickly the predictions on a large data set. The output of rapid deployment node is used to evaluate the models and pick up the best models by comparing. Let's see the results here. What are we comparing? We are comparing the error rates. We are comparing the gain charts. We are comparing lift charts, confusion metrics, and many other outputs. So based on the information provided through rapid deployment, you can pick up the best model, and this PMML model can actually be deployed in the enterprise system. It's pretty easy to deploy. Let's see how it can be done. So once you edit your PMML model, you can go to options. You can go to the PMML model and deploy it to enterprise directly from here. So I have a couple of PMML models which I have deployed to my enterprise, which I'll just show you. I go into my models, and you can see that I have logistic regression model deployed. I have random forest, and I have sand classification, which I have already deployed. Now, these PMML models can be sent to Streambase, and Anna has already shown a way to transfer these models to Streambase. And you can use these PMML models and do the same process again. Now, let's see how these PMML models can be used in Statistica too. Let's open another workspace now. where we will be deploying this PMML model on our deployment data. So we have our deployment data where we don't have the credit rating information which we need to predict, but we have linked it to the PMML model which we selected, and this is linked through my enterprise data. And you can also copy-paste the PMML model directly in this area. You can provide a link to it. I am loading it through the enterprise system. So this PMML model can be deployed again using the same rapid deployment node. After executing the model, we can get the predictions as well as the probability scores. And these probability scores can be used to create some business rules. Let's go how you can create these rules. We already have some rules here, but I'll show you how you can do it from the feature finder too. You simply search for rules, and you get something called a rules builder. Once you click, you can move it to the data you want it to connect. I connected it to a node. I can edit my parameters. I can go and edit and start defining my rules. So rules can be, if my bad prediction is greater than 0.7, then I would like to take some action here, which is take some action, or I would say a recommendation which says that the person is a high-risk customer. Okay. We need to put it in quotes. So there you go. And you can see we can define certain recommendations or actions or create these rules. Now these rules can be as complex as possible. You can simply edit text and start writing your rules, or you can also open some saved rules from, again, your enterprise or file on your laptop or system. I'll just close this and I'll show you the actual rules. So there you go, edit, and you can see that we have some rules defined here, right? So you can define the category. Sorry, I said recommendation before. It's a category. Then based on that, you are making some recommendations, which is if the purpose of the credit for which a person took a loan is household appliance, then send it to the mortgage department, or maybe send it for further revision, or deny the loan to a person, or accept the loan based on what we just did. Once all these rules are built, we can actually visualize this data using Spotfire. We can connect it to the Spotfire data export node. Only thing we need to take care here is that before creating this node in your workspace, you need to create a blank Spotfire dashboard and save it at a certain path. So I've created a blank Spotfire dashboard, which is exported data, and I've saved it in a certain path here. So I can simply now click this node, and the data which I just saw after I executed the rules will be pushed to the Spotfire dashboard. And if I open it, I can just copy this path, paste it in my run. You already have it here, and simply do OK. And this will open the Spotfire dashboard with data which we just analyzed for visualization purpose. We already have, I've already opened one dashboard which has the data which we just created. So you can see we have the credit scoring information and rest of all the other variables that are available. Now, Spotfire can also be used for better visualizations. You can create more visualizations here. I have created one already, which is a finished dashboard. You can start visualizing your summaries, your scatter plots. You can go on credit risk view, and you can visualize, sorry, it's opening the previous one. Yes, so you can visualize the risk for categories based on the predictions you have just created, low, medium, high. You can visualize the actual versus predicted summary. You can visualize, you can start monitoring your models by the error rates. So this is how we can actually link Statistica and Spotfire to solve a business problem. I hope this was helpful. And now I will let Heleen take over to explain more about TIBCO community as well as the next webinar.
Thank you very much, Ritika. So hopefully everyone on the WebEx is keen to try this out for yourselves with our sample data sets and your own data. The TIBCO community is a platform for our users. It has tons of how-to information on, and also, the ability to find a lot of resources to either take a step back if you're a new user, or to, look at more advanced topics if you are further along in your data science learning journey. You will also be able to ask questions. You will find a template to download, and on that Try Now button, you can download free trials for all of our products. We also have this dedicated TIBCO community page that we mentioned a couple of times. This has the links to all the webinars, the data sets, the exercises, and detailed descriptions on how to use it. We're also collecting some answers to all the questions that you've asked, and are continuing to add useful links to the rest of the content of the community. If you'd like any support on those exercises, by the way, please submit a question in the answers section of the top menu here. And if you use the tag Compete and Win, our team of experts will be sort of alerted that this is about the webinar series, and you'll get a quick response. So for webinar 3 of this series on October 25th, we'll be joined by Christer Ekvist, our TIBCO partner. He is Managing Director of Precise Prediction, which is an international spin-off from Stats of Norway, and it's a specialist big data and data science consulting company. Christer and I, in this third webinar, will share real-life machine learning use cases, and will show some of the positive business outcomes achieved, as well as some of the challenges of these analytic journeys. So we've now shown you hands-on how TIBCO is a one-stop shop for actionable insights, providing analytic tools in support of your organization's needs for BI, visual analytics, data science, and streaming analytics, and how you as a data scientist can use these tools to apply the machine learning models that you have developed in production. And with that, we are at the end of what we wanted to share in terms of content with you today, and are open for Q&A. So I'm just going to check the chats and the Q&As that we have received. One of the questions I actually can answer, and it's a question about the community, and it is, do I need to be a customer or buying your software to access the TIBCO community? The answer is no. It's available for everyone. You just need to log in. I do recommend you register, because it allows you to ask these questions and interact with the community, but it's open for everyone. Let me see, the next question, Ritika, this one is for you. And the question is, can Statistica also work on big data?
Yes, so Statistica has a big data menu. You can use R, Python, H2O, Spark, and even do in-database analytics if you want.
Wonderful, thank you. And that's available in one of those drop-down menus?
Yes, it's available on the menu.
On the workspace, yeah. Excellent. Anna, if you could unmute yourself, I have a question for you that just came in. And the question is it possible to install and use additional R packages for machine learning and deep learning?
Thank you, Heleen. Yes, it is possible. When you go to, I showed you TER tools, where you can open RStudio, or you can also open the TER console, and you can use that for installing R packages of any type, all the R packages, into your embedded TER that is part of Spotfire. If you are using a TER that is in a shared environment or in a server, then you can do the installation once, and it will be available for all your users.
Excellent.
So effectively, there are about 7,000 packages in R, and they can be run in TER directly, and for the most part, and they encompass all the math under the sky pretty much.
Wonderful, thank you, Anna. There's a question whether Statistica works in real time. The answer is yes. There's actually a few more questions coming in. We will be answering those on the on the community page itself, just because we're running out of time today. We're at the top of the hour and at the end of our webinar. So we will be answering the questions to you directly and also summarizing them on the community page so that you can all benefit from the answers. We're going to give you compliments as well. Thank you for that. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'd like to thank our presenters, Anna and Ritika, for excellent demos. Thanks for the audience, all of you, to stay on for the whole webinar, for your participation in the Q&A as well. We will share the recording with you. Typically, this is within 24 hours, so please look out for an email from TIBCO Marketing. I wish you all a great rest of the day. We look forward to seeing you in the TIBCO community and in this third webinar as part of the series in 2 weeks' time. Thank you and goodbye.